48-hour art check, round 147 or 8. I think one of those two.
I don't know, because we were just talking Kickstarter amounts and my
48-hour
brain
art
got
check,
confused by
round
numbers and numbers.
104. Yeah, right.
48-hour art check.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yes.
I've already screwed 3 things up, so that's it, right? Things come in threes. It's done now.
Let's hope so.
Okay. Welcome back. Back again.
Yes, I know. I feel like the world's biggest flake for having missed quite a few sessions. So
No. Yeah.
back at it.
Quite a few. You
Hope I
missed Monday. Did you miss another
I
day?
know. Monday just feels like this is how my brain works. Like, because I'm a type A, kind of like have to do it all kind of personality. Missing one day of it feels like missing 10, you know?
You missed one. It was a phenomenal episode, but it wasn't. See, the thing is if you exaggerate what it's like to miss one, then it makes it so that I can't miss one. And I want to miss one every once in a while. We're gonna be going on 200-300 of these at some point, and I'm gonna miss a few, and I'm gonna feel okay about it.
It's a fair point. There's a lot of slanging of links in the chats.
Yes.
There's a little competition going on with the hundreds where we're trying to get the most people drawn to the site. And so the competition, like, in order for anyone in it to win, you just go to the 100daysofmakingcomics.com/Josh K, and it will up everyone's ranking and help everyone. I'm just being a jackass.
I'm just, while you're doing that, I'm just reminding everybody that I actually control everything that happens on the screen. So, one moment.
Nothing's going to happen that's not going to say the 100daysofmakingcomics.com/Josh K. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that's just going to magically pop up on the screen that's gonna compete with that information.
Yeah, nothing at all. And just for fun, since we're live and I've already screwed the show up, this is going to scroll now. So let me throw.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be our art, right, for the art check or something like that.
Yep, that's it. Nothing else.
Definitely not going to be anything unpredictable or, okay. Oh, great. Really professional, Cory.
Yep, one sec. I got to add a space or it doesn't make any sense. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, well, cool. So definitely do not go to that link. Go to Josh K / But anyhow, actually, in reality, go to any of the links in the chats. We have a Kickstarter live for Werewolves and Unicorns. It's the second 100 Days of Making Comics anthology number 2. I just said second, number 2. So see, now I'm going to make mistakes in threes. But anyhow, you go to it right now because currently it is funded at it's like a little over $1,000 overfunded, and I think we can actually get it further. And here's the reason I would say you should really back it is it's literally one printing, and so the second this Kickstarter is done, once all the creators have their copies and have sold them, and they'll sell fast at conventions, you're gonna have no way to access this awesome anthology that Cory, myself, a lot of the people in the chats tonight are in, and so it's a book worth getting. So go get it while you can. Yeah. So anyway.
Absolutely, it's great, and I know that Josh is struggling to read what's on the screen because of the setup that I have going on. So it's a little. I think because I was on Mike's, so I helped. We when we did the launch, I helped Mike set up his OBS the way that I've got mine set up, and I've never been on the other end of it, and it's like watching something at like 5 frames per second. It's terrible.
Yeah, it definitely delay. It takes some getting used to. So
yeah. So
cool.
I know that Peter has been claiming to be in the lead. no matter what the actual facts of it are. So maybe he'll claim it hard enough that that will come true or something. There's a lot of trash talking going on today in
Yeah,
today's
so I would
episode.
just recommend for those of you who really want to keep Peter in the lead, just go to his link, which is the 100daysofmakingcomics.com/Josh K. And just help him stay in the lead. That's really going to assist.
Super weird that Peter's link is Josh K. That's odd.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. There's nothing nefarious about that at all. All right, so should we jump into the check and talk about what we've done and stuff
No,
like
I
that?
think we should continue to do this. Just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah. What have you gotten done in the last little bit?
So I did the lettering and the panel borders for the next page of Quarterly Stories, and then I finished the rough pencils for roughly about half the page. So I'm hoping to probably get a little further on that as well. And then other than that, like we've just been kind of trying to encourage people to go to the Kickstarter for the 100 Days of Making Comics and help continue to put it over the top. So yeah.
That's awesome. That looks great. How many more pages do you have until the book wraps?
So I'm actually really close. Like I thought I was gonna wrap in May. So for those of you who've been following for a while, you'll be like, yeah, sure you're gonna wrap, but because it's a little over May now. But I have about 5 pages left, which is kind of awesome. And I put years into the book, so to be like 5 pages to the end is pretty awesome. It's pretty exciting. It's also like anxiety inducing, but at the same time, I'm kind of excited because the second I'm done with that, I just want to basically do a good cover design, some promotional material design. But the second I finish the last page, I also kind of want to do like a blog that documents more of what you do when you're finished with a book, and kind of follows that whole process, because I think that's a untapped territory. Because I think most of us are like busy making books, but we don't get too heavily into the aftermath, which is like, what do you do with a book when it's done? So
Yeah, that'd be super interesting.
yeah. What about you? So what'd you get done in the
Yeah, so I have been working on. I'm not sure how public I can be with this because I don't know what stage I'm at with it. But I've got some client work that I'm working on, where I'm doing some storyboards, and I am learning this plugin that allows for like joystick and slider controls onto rigged characters, so you can control multiple, basically anything that can be keyframed can be rigged to have slider controls outside of that composition, which is like really awesome. Nice. And with that, I'm also working on, and this is just like a side thing, I've brought this up a few times, but I'm breaking this up into the different layers that it needs to be in. And this is all of the parts I need for this guy to be animated. He'll have actually 6 legs instead of 3. But I don't need to make them because they're duplicates of each other. And so just a lot of kind of animation stuff is kind of what I'm doing. If I can get this thing to go away. There we go. There's the away button. Yeah, and then it's been a fun week because I've crashed a few. Not a few. I've crashed one party online where they're interviewing Peter, and Peter kind of snuck me in through the back door, and I jumped in at the end, and it was kind of fun. So yeah, just different. It's fun to see this group go into marketing mode because it's like a really productive group of individuals, the 100 Days crew, and it's just fun to see everybody like put all that effort that they normally put into making art to like promoting art. And there are so many people that are so good at it. It's just like, I'm just seeing stuff everywhere and it's rad. It's just really cool. And so that's just been, I don't know. That's just been fun. I haven't had a ton to do with that. I did make a few things that people can use, and I think some people are planning on doing that, and I've got to do that too. But that's pretty much it. I don't know. It hasn't been terribly productive. I mean, it's been productive, but I haven't been producing because I'm ramping up. I'm ramping up for like a big client project that I have to like learn new software on. So
Yeah, that's tough too. I mean, I think I mentioned this last week, but maybe not. But like, it is one of those when it rains, it pours kind of thing because we're starting to ramp up at my work, so we're getting closer and closer to rush season, which means longer hours, and then it's like magically at that time, that's when one of my older clients was like, "By the way, we need to have you do 6 designs." So it's like
right.
this weekend and last weekend have pretty much been shot by doing client work. So that's just, I mean, it really is hard to maintain. And that's why I think we try to encourage people to do this kind of art check type thing, because it definitely is a motivator to kind of stay working on your stuff. And I would say like has definitely been an influence on me getting any progress or headway done on my comic, just to show, today. I did forget to mention this, so maybe this can go into my struggles or whatever. But I've also been practicing with my band
Mm-hmm.
for a gig this Friday. So if you are in the Antelope Valley area, which is pretty unlikely, although it's pretty close to like Riverside and that stretch of California at the edge of LA County, you can come check out my band, No Saboteurs. We're playing live at Big Shots Bar and Grill starting at 9 o'clock on Friday, and so that should be pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um,
Sorry,
yeah.
I keep
Oh,
typing
and
new.
by the way, if you're having trouble reading that link, I will be editing the show notes. You can click the same link that you're seeing on the screen, just right down there.
Oh man,
Oh, it's too good.
this is great. I love that you and I have a similar temperament because sometimes I'm worried that if I give people crap that they won't understand that I'm joking. But yeah, so it's great.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Challenges for me, I don't know. Huge anxiety stuff with things that I cannot mention publicly that have resolved themselves and are over now. And so that's good. And then it's summertime. So somehow my daughter keeps convincing me, she's very, very convincing, that she doesn't need to go to bed when I want her to go to bed because she doesn't need to get up for school. And
Mm-hmm.
so my phone died tonight and I was playing video games with her and then I looked up and I was like, there are no clocks in this room. Like, what time is it even? And it was like 9:40. So I was like, ah, crap. So anyway, so it's just I'm just digging my own grave with with my productivity. Um, but yeah, so but some good motorcycle rides and stuff like that. I don't have any. Nothing is actually happening anymore that is of any consequence. I'm just still, burning the candle at both ends unnecessarily.
Yeah.
so so anyway, yeah. How about plans for you?
So my plans are definitely this will be the last art check of the week. So by the next time we do it, I'm hoping to have had a very awesome show on Friday. That should be pretty fun. Play some rock and roll, blow people's brains, melt some faces, and then other than that, I really would like to have this page fully penciled by then, because like I don't want progress to stop when I'm like this close to the finish line. Like
Yeah.
that's always a fear of mine, is like getting this close and being like meh. you know and then I do, on a side note, just on a personal level, I do have the goal of encouraging everybody to support Cory Kerr, in particular, by going to the 100 days of making comics.com/Josh K. I think that would be a significant goal. Yeah.
This is going to become the new sign up for Scott's email newsletter. It's free thing, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are watching this, real quick before I give my answer and before we jump into our topic, do you guys have anything you want us to talk about? Because we haven't decided on a topic. So if there's I'll be more professional about it. Today we're gonna do a user generated topic for the thing. So anyway, yeah. So if anybody has any ideas, go in the chat. Plans for me, I don't know if this sounds stupid or if I just don't know how to describe it, but there's a way to rig a face in After Effects where it mimics 3D in rotation, and it involves some shape tweens and animated mask paths linked up to like a series of sliders, and if it sounds confusing, it is confusing. But I would like to have a functioning model of that, and because it's one of those things that I don't know how, I don't know exactly what I'm doing with it. I don't know how long it will take me. So there's that, and then my backup of everything. If I have time, I'm going to color some pages, which I've been saying for a couple episodes now, and I haven't been able to color some pages. And then more promoting of the show. So, or of the not the show, the Kickstarter.
100daysmakingcomics.com/Josh K. That's what he's talking about.
Right, and that's spelled Coryk. Josh is a little dyslexic, so he says the wrong words. That's not even dyslexia. Yeah, so that's that. So we've got people in the chat saying hashtags or hashtages, I think is what Gaz is saying there. Tagging subjects, people, etc. You should talk about everyone going to 100 days of making comics.com/Mike is what Mike Emirates is saying. Victor just says, I can't help it. You're all amazing people. And marketing, talk about comic trends. Comic trends would be super interesting. So Victor's suggesting comic trends. I think I could talk about that for a while. My problem with, I like the topic of marketing. And I'm really good at B2B and B2C marketing. I'm really bad at marketing my stuff to people. I just feel like I don't know if I have enough to say about that. But I like the idea of comic trends. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I have to talk marketing so often at work that, like, honestly, today it's just not in the mood. Yeah. But personal marketing is a whole different challenge.
At work, it's like, okay, I only have a $50,000 budget for this marketing campaign. So what am I going to do with that? And then at home, I'm like, okay, I only have, if I skip some things and cut some things out, I could probably get $25 to throw towards some marketing. So what do I do with that? And so the scale is so different that I just feel like, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Okay.
All right. So comic trends. Let's do comic trends. Before doing comic trends, though, I just want to encourage everybody to go to the 100 days of making comics.com/Josh K. I think that was misspoken earlier, and I just wanted to clarify because there's been some misspeaking, and I just want to clarify it's 100 days of making comics /Josh K. That's what Mike was saying in the chats. That's what Cory's been saying over and over again. So, yes, okay. So
that's what our topic? Today's topic is comic trends. And I'm sure during this episode, if you're listening to this later as an audio, that Josh is going to plug a link which he's going to say incorrectly. And if this goes up before the Kickstarter is ending, go to 100daysofmakingcomics.com, no spaces or hyphens or asterisks or capitalizations, / Cory K, Coryk, and that will go to the Kickstarter, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I can't tell if did we freeze people that are watching this, or is that just my?
No, I'm.
Are we going?
Yeah, I think we're going.
Okay, my thing froze. All right, well that'll be fun for everybody to listen to later. Okay, so comic trends. What
Yeah.
I mean, we could go back, 100 years and start from then, or just start with what we're seeing like right now. Where do you want to jump in on that?
Man, I'd love to dig into the weeds, but I think for time's sake, maybe we should focus on today, and
Okay.
then kind of, if we feel so inclined, maybe work our way back. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great. Um, I have some predictions. Should we start with some predictions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my prediction is, as much as everybody loves Marvel and DC movies, I believe that very soon we will reach a saturation point where people will get really sick of it.
Yeah,
And I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen because of a number of factors. But I mean, it's kind of like, do you remember that show Heroes? It was like
yeah.
it was like a show where, save the cheerleader, save the world,
Mm-hmm.
and like the first season, I remember everybody was talking about that, and there was this
Yeah,
giant buildup that whole year, and then they saved the world, right? And there was all this conspiracy theory and all this stuff, and then season 2 came out, and they kind of had to say like, okay, so we're gonna start building up again, and they like sort of hit a reset button, and
yeah,
I kind of feel like that's gonna happen here because Endgame was such a gigantic buildup over the course of several decades.
yeah,
Um, and Gazbot in the chats is agreeing with me, that I think it's going to be a bit of a letdown, which I think is after this, right? I think Endgame was amazing, but afterwards, it's very difficult, because what happened is you start with like, some very small scale stuff, and then you ramp up to some national stuff, and then some worldwide stuff, and then there's some space stuff, and then it got to the point where we literally have like giant space gods fighting giant space gods.
yeah,
Like above that, I mean, it's hard to get bigger than that, and it's
yeah,
hard to go from there to get smaller. So here's what I think is going to happen, and then we can talk about some trends. I think we are starting to see and have seen for the last little while the laying the foundation of indie comics becoming mainstream, um,
yeah,
and you see them kind of like kind of move into different areas of media, and I think they're gonna become bigger and bigger and bigger, and so I think there'll be a resurgence of a lot of stuff beyond like superhero stuff. I love superhero stuff, but that's what most people think comics are, like as
yeah,
if like comic books are a genre, and comic books are not a genre; they're a media, and so I think that's going to happen, and I think it's going to start. I think it's going to start as things bleed over more and more into TV, and you see things like Deadly Class and Umbrella Academy and stuff like that. I mean, Deadly Class, it was announced on Twitter that Sci-Fi is dropping it, and they are shopping it around for other networks, and I think it has enough of a following streaming online that
uh-huh.
I will imagine somebody will pick it up, and it could be somebody with huge money. I mean, Sci-Fi, they're great and they've been around for a while, but I mean, if Netflix or Amazon or something like that pick that show up,
Yeah,
all of a sudden you have like Marvel Defenders level budget, you know, which could be really interesting. So I
yeah.
think you're going to see more of that.
Gaz mentioned off kilter superhero stuff like the Vertigo kind of style stuff. Like we know Sandman's been optioned, but it's never been created, and that's been that way for like 10 years. But
Yeah.
what happens when the dreaming like world comes to like um, uh, the Vertigo type stuff like Doom Patrol and Swamp Thing are coming out. So it's like that's a really good point.
And just the fact that Neil Gaiman exists, I think, is going to be this. I mean, he is going to own the world at some point in time because
Yeah.
that guy is just prolific. And I feel like the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, he's been a great author forever, and people have loved his stuff forever. And the last 3 or 4 years, you see his stuff just blowing up everywhere.
Yeah.
And I just watched a couple episodes of Good Omens, and it is the goofy, silly Monty Python esque British humor that I've missed for so long.
Yeah. It's
But
got that Harry Pratchett kind of twist with the
yeah,
dialogue and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but it's done in like a modern style with modern production values and stuff, and like modern CG. But then it also still has like the weird, like poorly cut out, like puppet rigged stop motion, like title sequences and stuff. Anyway, so I agree. I think Gaz is right, and you're gonna see a lot more stuff like that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. The one thing I'd also interject in there is that I think that and this might offend people who are like super into superhero comics, and I hope it's not taken that way because I mean, what got me into comics in the first place was like heavily like to wanting to do them was getting really invested in Spider-Man. So
Right.
I come from like an MCU background. Like I lived and breathed Marvel comics for a good portion of my life. Um, but I think what turned off me about mainstream comics is going to start coming to a head with mainstream film because I remember this point where I was reading comics and there were so many hashtags at the time. They were not called hashtags, but they'd have like a little hashtag in a word bubble that was incomprehensible if you were following a series, like you're following Spider-Man, and there would be this little hashtag when a villain's talking, they'd be like, oh, it's something, something, and you wouldn't understand it. You look, and then there's this little box that's saying, see this other issue of this other comic to be able to follow the narrative. So then you go buy that issue, and there's 5 hashtags leading you to 5 other issues. So before you know it, you've spent like $50 on all these different issues of comics, kind of jumping in at their story arcs at points you can't follow because you can't follow every single arc. And it just seemed like a marketing scheme at a pretty young age. So like for me, I got turned off because the stories became less about story and more about these epic arcs that would get you to have to buy things. And I think they're like, when it's done well, like I think the MCU currently like did an excellent job at it. And I know some people disagree with it, but I feel like even the weakest films in that whole world were still some of the better superhero films ever made.
Yeah.
And but I do think it's going to be hard to replicate without it feeling like a big cash grab. And there are even points in that kind of feel so like blatantly just you're forcing sales, and I think people kind of get burnt out on that. So I would recommend, like, that's one thing I would say is like I think if the storylines just get too complex to where you have to see every single thing to understand what's going on, that could be a huge turnoff. I'd say also just the Superman problem you were talking about, which is they've always had this issue writing Superman in an interesting way because you have a guy who's a god. So now the villains have to be like ultra gods.
Right.
And once you've gone to ultra gods, like where can you go from there? Like it is kind of interesting to see like when the ceiling gets raised so high. So it is interesting that when you get that epic, that sometimes the things that really stand out, I think, to people are more quiet stories that are or like off-kilter stories. So yeah, I kind of wonder if film is going to kind of replicate the whole thing you know?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Victor had a good comment that he thinks that they're wrapping up phase 3 and phase 4, that they're gonna have to build up again, but will cater to a younger audience. And I could see that being a really good move. And I could also see that exact thing pissing off a lot of very vocal people my age. But I like stuff for younger audiences. And I want to say that, like, if you continue, well, okay, this is why people don't get in prank wars with me. I shouldn't say this on the internet. I'm going to say this on the internet. Please don't do anything. But I'm the type of person who, like, I don't do the one-upmanship thing, like,
Yeah.
if somebody wants to prank war with me, I don't want to do that, so I just end it. So, like, where a normal prank war goes, like here to here to here to here to here, until it kind of gets a little out of control. Like, somebody pranks me and I do one of two things. I'm like, okay, I'd like to let this slide and just tell you that let's not do this, right? And then or I just say, well, what's 11? What's 11 in this scenario? I'm just going to do that. And I remember one time in college, this girl wanted to start a prank war, and they came to our house and they stole all of our keyboards and mice, and then left goldfish upside down in cups upside down, like, what, you know what I'm talking about, where you flip it
Yeah.
upside down, so you have to, anyway. And so I just calmly walked next door and I said, hey, I just need you to know that I don't do the slight escalation thing. I'm just gonna burn your apartment down. So, look, we could just, like, call a truce. And all of her roommates were like, they looked at her and they said, if you get in a prank war with Cory, I'm on Cory's side, just so you know. Like, and so it just kind of ended it there. But I feel like that level of escalation that happens, there is a certain point where you have to hit the reset button. And Gaz in the chats is talking about where, like, the comics, the mainstream, the big two, they've gotten into this pattern in the last, like, 5 to 10 years, where they feel like they just need to reboot everything, like, every couple of years, and it keeps happening. And I think it's because, here's the thing, is, like, all of this is based on, like, 5th century Greek, like, tragedies and stuff. And so, like, you've got Perseus, you've got all the, and I'm not talking about, like, like the pantheon being comic book characters. I'm talking about comic book characters being treated as if they were part of the pantheon. There's a certain, like, bounds and conditions by which you can play, and if you get outside of that, people are like, oh, that's not part of that character, but if you stretch it just a little bit, you're fine. And that's like what Greek tragedy poets did forever. And the problem with that is there aren't Greek tragedy poets anymore. And the reason that there aren't is, if eventually you just told all the versions of that story that you were allowed to tell, they would get fined by the government if they upset their audience. And it's not like that anymore, because the government doesn't care if people get pissed about, Wolverine or whatever.
Yeah.
But social media fines these companies now if they step out of line. And so there's this weird kind of back and forth, where there's a group of people that are like, I like good stories, and there's a group of people that are like, I like familiar stories. And then those two things are often at odds. And so then they're like, okay, so that we don't have any continuity issues, and so that we can continue to retell the same stories to please the people, we're just going to keep rebooting. The problem with that is, like, if nothing matters, then no one cares about your story. And so, like, with the rebooting problem, if the stakes, it's kind of like Bucky coming back from the dead, right? If Bucky can come back from the dead, like, is Uncle Ben going to come back from the dead? Because at some point in time, there has to be some stakes. And if there's no stakes, then why do I care? They're not really in trouble. And that's the problem with a lot of mainstream stuff. And I love a lot of mainstream stuff, and I still read a lot of mainstream stuff, and it's fun. But I know that at the end of the issue, or at the end of the story arc, they're going to have to put all the toys back unharmed. Whereas
Yeah.
in indie, even superhero indie, like Invincible that just wrapped, or anything else along those lines, like people die, they stay dead. Like real stuff happens, and there are real consequences. And
Yeah.
the fact that you don't have like 75 years of invested cultural history in a character means that you can kill them Game of Thrones style and people will feel it, but there's not like this outrage and clamor for nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is touching on a really important point too, which is like, both the MCU and the DC universe, like, have their Lazarus pits and
Right.
and their alternate timelines. And so like they um like if something goes wrong, it's like you can time travel and fix it. If somebody dies, you can just dip them in a pool and they're saved and back to life. It's like the the stakes become incredibly low, and so the tension that you feel when a character is at risk is just really minimized because it's like, well, you know, uh, they'll be back. Even like I don't want to spoil, but I don't know if it's too late to. I'm sure it's not really a big deal to spoil Endgame, but anyhow,
The spoiler
it,
ban has been lifted, so if you haven't seen Endgame yet, why are you watching the show? Go see Endgame.
yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So we'll spoil it, but before I'll give you 2 seconds, and during those 2 seconds, say go to the 100daysmaking comics.com/Josh K. Um, so so now that breaks over, yeah, I mean they kill off a character, like a really big character in it, and
Several.
and and uh, and this one character is probably going to stay dead, and that is really like seems really impactful and stuff, but at the end of the day, even watching that, I'm like, well, they're still going to reboot that hero. So
Right.
like that hero is just going to be, that guy's wife or like some young character. Like they're going to pass the torch on to the next person. It's it's interesting because to me, um, what I'm reminded of is like, in the '80s, how music was just butt rock like all the time and hair bands.
I
Um,
missed most '80s music because my dad is a '70s punk rocker,
got
and
it.
so I
That's
listened
good.
to the Beatles, the Ramones, Cheap Trick.
That's
I kind of missed
good.
all of that, and my wife is really into it, and so like
Yeah.
every time I go to my in-laws, I'm like, I hate this decade so much.
So the decade was full of like excess, and the mainstream was pretty hideous. But at the same time, you had like SST records putting out these like records at a loss, like the majority of the time. And at the same time, like Discord records in like DC, like, and these are record companies started, but like the case of Discord, it's started by like a 14, 15 year old who's hand gluing these little vinyl records. And yet like that sound that was kind of going on in the underground kind of broke to the mainstream,
Yeah.
not to the full extent. I don't, and this I think parallels comics perfectly. I think even if you have indie comics break, I don't think they're really going to break. Like I don't think they're going to break on the level of mainstream comics, but I
So
do think they can cut through the noise and influence the mainstream.
yeah, and that's I think the indie rebellious counterculture, underground, whatever you want to call it, and music is a great example of this, will always infect and mutate popular culture. And I say infect and mutate intentionally because by the time, and I don't want to choose my words carefully, but I want to make sure that I'm not misunderstood. Here, I'm not scared to say this. I just want to make sure that I'm not misunderstood. I like a lot of the stuff that's popular, and I think that's fine. And if that's what you're into, there's nothing wrong with that. But by the time it gets mainstream, it's diluted and sanitized. And I don't mean like that it has to be gross or not safe for work or whatever. I'm just talking about like the authenticity and the raw humanity of it gets missed. For example, every time Hollywood is just a churn of chasing trends and missing them. Like that's what Hollywood does, and that's what they've done forever. It's not anything new. But and everybody's like, oh, they keep making sequels. I'm sorry, it's been like that. It's been like that forever.
Yeah.
It's not like there isn't multiple Jaws sequels, But the fact of
Hmm.
the matter is that people they learn the wrong lessons, and so every once in a while, Hollywood will produce something that is actually authentic and real and unique and connects with people. And people in Hollywood, they learn the wrong lesson, right? They learn that, oh, I need to make a character that wears a red suit. And it's like, no, you need to write a character that speaks to people like that
Hmm.
character in the red suit, or whatever. And so they miss the point of a lot of those things. But it happens because somebody takes a risk. And so I think I think what you're saying is right. I think that indie will never break to the point where it becomes the popular culture, because by definition, when it does that, you lose something. And I'm not one of those people that's like mad at people for selling out or whatever.
No,
I'm
no.
just saying that when there's big money on the line,
Yeah.
there are very few people that have the control to be able to do what they want to do with it, because you don't have the millions or billions or whatever it takes to be able to make those calls. And so decision by committee is always, kind of okay most of the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
For
like chocolate chip ice cream.
yeah.
It's like, it's not offensive. It's not really good. It's fine. Some of it's better than others, but it's still like just slightly better than vanilla.
Yeah. Like for
They're better flavors, but you risk offending people who don't like that flavor.
exactly for every Nirvana, there's a Husker Du, right? So it's like meaning I think right now what you're seeing in indie comics is the equivalent of like indie music, where there might be a few people who luck out and really break like in that sequence, but more or less, and this is going to sound defeatistic. I don't think it is, but more or less, a lot of the people in the indie are going to be influencing stuff that breaks, like, and probably never break to quite that same level. And a really good example of that is like, if you look at the impact Watchmen had on the comic industry, and then realize like a good portion of the storylines the MCU has been basing their stuff off of, the iterations of the storylines came after or during Watchmen as a reaction. So it's like there's some high stakes, but it's like a lot of what we're currently seeing in superhero comics and film are like influenced by like Alan Moore doing that book. And then that book that Alan Moore was doing, that's considered this big undercutting, just huge, like impactful book in mainstream comics. Indie comics were doing like 20 or 30 years prior to that.
Yeah.
So like imagine if you're somebody who's reading Raw, right? Or you're reading R. Crumb, and then you pick up Watchmen and people are like, careful, man, this is really lewd. I mean, I can imagine the reaction of most people would be like, really? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, because like I just read a comic by R. Crumb where, like, you know what I mean? Like the difference in the levels of complexity and authenticity, even within the mainstream thing that was really dynamic, was all riffing off of things in the underground. The point being, if you're in the underground, you're in a good place, because to me, um, you know, it, I think you will still see stupid movies in the mainstream,
Yeah.
um, and I think that's just in general. I think you're going to see divisive writing on television, in books, like bestsellers. Best-selling movies are going to use plot cop outs as long as they're getting money. But I think there is this nice undercurrent of people who really want comics, and really want authenticity, and that undercurrent is the place to be, because that undercurrent's evergreen, and that's the part that I'm kind of trying to get at. Because I think if you think about like um, a lot of these superhero films in 20 years, how they'll be viewed, I don't know if they're going to hold up to the level of like a lot of indies that are probably being put out at the same time.
Yeah,
And so,
which are gonna be like those kind of sleeper hits that they hit like 10 years later. Like one of the best comics and the best movies that has come out, in recent memory. I think it came out straight to streaming. I don't even know that it came to theaters, but it's I Killed Giants. And I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't watched that or read that, but like it's raw, it's real. Um, it's okay for kids, and it deals with some really heady stuff, and if you don't cry, you're gonna get close, and but like nobody really talks about it. I mean, you hear the like hardcore fans talking about it on Twitter and things like that, but like I was a hardcore fan of that book. I didn't even know that there was a movie. I just happened across it on Amazon, and I was like, "Is that based on the comic?" And then I looked, and I was like, "Holy crap! I can't believe that they made this." There's
yeah,
going to be stuff like that
yeah.
that's really impactful that I think will be discovered and slowly build.
Like YA is a really good example. I think there's more growth in comics in the young adult world recently than there's been. So this would be like tying into the kind of current trends too, but it's like young adult comics are making so much headway and
Mm-hmm.
progress. I mean, and even in adaptation to film, like, you watch like Hilda on Netflix, it's brilliant. It's so well done. And it's super true and authentic to the comics. And,
Yeah.
like to me, the thing that I was really excited about 10 years ago was like being able to, like, I was noticing Barnes and Noble's graphic novel section was just getting huge. And now when I go to Barnes and Noble, the graphic novel section is shrunk again, and everything on the rack is Marvel. And I'm like, oh man, like, because it was like that was kind of where graphic novels had gotten, and then there was a point like about 10 years ago where you couldn't go to a decent bookstore and not run into like there's mouse, there's blankets, there's like these certain indies that are going to be at every single bookstore.
Right.
And now we're actually backwards where that's not the case anymore, but you can sure find Spider-Man. And that's, to
Right.
me, that feels like we made so much headway. We had the book section. We almost were at the point where you'd have the comics categorized by genre. That would
Yeah.
be, to me, that would be the ultimate point for comics to get to, is where you could go and you could see the fiction section, you'd see the nonfiction section,
Yeah.
you could go to the
See
religious
the
section.
the
Like,
westerns and the sci-fis and
yeah,
yeah.
wouldn't that be beautiful, right? But now it's like back to that rack of just mixed up nonsense on the wall, or on the shelf, and they haven't even bothered to alphabetize it. It's just like, oh, this is a comic, I'll put it there. But then you go to the kids section, and
Yeah.
it's a wall, and it's a wall that's like got like not only comics, but they're like getting the same awards. So they've got like Caldecott, Newbery, like all of these comics are starting to make headway in that realm. And to me, that's a trend I don't see dying, because I do think comics, I think because of librarians and a lot of the hard work they've done with comics and literacy, I think they've made a lot of headway. And I think, to me, that is a really interesting trend. But the part of comics, the little section I really am in love with, I'm very bummed, because I do feel like it's made some down progress. Although there's some really cool stuff when it comes to like the breadth of what Image is putting out now is astounding,
Yeah.
and the variety of what they're putting out and the quality of it has really upped. So I don't know, it's like a mix, but I am
Well,
kind of bummed, because I really thought there was going to come a point where you go to a bookstore and it's just like, you know like a whole bunch of sections.
I think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And at my Barnes and Noble, because I don't really have any comic stores near me, I've got one that's about 30 miles away, and it's like it's about the size of a broom closet. But my, like I'll tell a quick story. This is years ago, based on this thing. But I walked in, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was like, "Good." And I said, "Hey, do you have any East of West?" And he said, "Oh, I don't." And I said, "Oh, do you have any Manhattan projects?" He said, "No, I don't." And I said, "Do you have blankets?" And he's like, I don't." And I was like, "Okay, well, what have you got?" And he's like, "Well, I feel really bad because like you're listing like tons of good titles." And I was like, "Do you have like Invincible?" And he's like, "No." And I was like, "Do you have like Oz from Scotty Young?" And he's like, "No." And I said, "Okay, why don't you have these things?" And he's like, "I feel bad because like I read all those and they're great books and I love them, but I can't sell them."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Really though? Because like you don't have them here. Like I would buy them. I have money. Would you like this money? You know, like
Yeah.
you've just decided that you can't sell them. You can sell them. They're just they take selling rather than like somebody seeing a recognizable character and buying a story, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I go across the street to the Barnes and Noble, and I noticed the same thing. I noticed that like all of a sudden it was like both sides of the aisle, and it
Yeah.
was all of this stuff. And they had DC on one side, they had Marvel on the other side, and that took up about a quarter of the aisle, and the rest of the aisle was like chock full of indie stuff. And then there
Hmm.
was this tiny little section of manga.
Yeah.
Now that takes up one side of the aisle, the other side is like sci-fi novels or something.
Yeah.
And it's
The
about
articles are
it's a,
starting to mix back in.
right, and it's about a fifth of the aisle is like DC and Marvel jammed into the corner. The
Mhm.
rest of the entire aisle is manga,
Yep.
and it is broken up into genre, and like Alita Battle Angel movie was a legit movie that tanked compared to a lot of the stuff that people saw because I think it was just a little too weird. But I mean that was a decent movie. Like I enjoyed it. They strayed a little bit from the manga, but I think in really good ways.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I think you're gonna start seeing um, American comics are still going to struggle for a while, but I think you're going to start seeing Japanese and European, start to kind of entrench because, frankly, they've been better at being true to humanity for longer
Yeah.
than we have over on this side of the world, and people are starting to recognize that. And the younger generation, they read manga.
Yep. No, that's actually a really good point. And manga shouldn't be forgotten about in this conversation because that's made tons of headway. Like, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah,
Although I do think a lot of the same devices and frustrations happen with manga artists too. Like, there's a whole slew of manga that's been kind of doing like slice of life stuff and then feels like outpowered by like the Naruto's of comics, where it's just like once again like they're. And by the way, I'm speaking as somebody who like I got really obsessed with Naruto, and my wife and I like watched that and Shippuden, and then we kind of dropped off at some point in mid Shippuden, but I kind of love it. It's a fun series, but that's the thing is like I kind of want just more. Like, to me, my desire for the trend and where I project the trend are kind of two different things. But like I said, the weird thing is I've never really been a trend kind of person. Like, I do like some trendy things, but generally what I find I like is usually just subsisting right underneath, which I think is a really fun place to be and to look. There's so much interesting stuff happening in the chats.
yeah.
regarding comics, regarding the industry and stuff like that. One thing I will say that I'm excited to see happening in comics is like there are more options than when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and there's more variety of characters, um, and more representation and stuff like that. And I think that's a good thing if done right. So I think there's a lot of things that we can, I don't know, that I think could be really cool. But it's at the end of the day, I think the biggest comics trend right now is on the 100 days of making comics.com / Josh K. And with that, we will wrap the show.
Except I have the microphone, so you will listen to every word that I have to say. Just kidding. No, I think we could continue to talk about this for hours and hours and hours because it's so many interesting things going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Art trends, we didn't even get into that. Like how brushwork seems like it's been evolving. Like that, we'll have to do that actually maybe next time. Like
yeah,
just
that'd be really interesting.
art styles.
Because I mean, you've got some of the biggest, heaviest hitters. So here's a teaser for the next episode. Some of the biggest, heaviest hitters in comics today, as far as illustration goes, almost all of them, just a few years ago, were all told, your style is too cartoony. It's not DC enough, or it's not Marvel enough, or whatever. And now they are the biggest names in those companies.
Yep.
And that's kind of an interesting trend. So that would be a really interesting one. And Victor's suggesting that we make this part 1, and I agree. So this is the end of part 1. And as has been scrolling across the screen the entire time, you can go to 100daysofmakingcomics.com /Cory K, CORYK, and that will take you to a page. You click that red button, that will take you to the Kickstarter. Let me tell you a little bit about the Kickstarter. If you haven't heard, it's pretty awesome. There's this guy that made this really cool video, and it really explains it really well. And there's 28 indie creators that have come together and told a bunch of 4-page stories about crazy creatures and cryptids and werewolves and unicorns and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so not every story has werewolves and unicorns in it. But we've got mermaids, and we've got all kinds of different stuff. So it's awesome. I can't, like, as I'm pitching it, I can't think of anything. And I was one of the ones that had so many different ones, but I can't remember any of their names. I'll tell you this. There's a clam monster that can turn into a dragon and makes people hallucinate. That's in one of the stories. That's the only one I can think of right now. Anyway, go there and you can check out like the art. You can check out. And here's another thing about this Kickstarter that I love about this anthology. This anthology is built on an idea that I think will persist. If there's any trend that is going to continue in spite of anything trying to kill it, it's that there are going to be groups of people that will gather together around those that are productive. Yeah. And this book is not based on anything other than have you finished the 100 days of making comics? And that is an interesting sifter, because there's a lot of people out there that talk a big game. There's very few people that can finish something. Being able to finish something is a huge indicator of a number of really rare traits. And so anyway, so this book is full of all kinds of different art, all kinds of different genres, from all kinds of different people, from all kinds of different backgrounds. And you're going to get, anyway, it's fascinating just to watch this group, super diverse in political opinion, in ideology, and everybody gets along because everybody loves comics so much that they're willing to spend a significant portion of their free time making them. And those are the stories that have made it into this book. It is well worth it, and it is not expensive. And so go check it out, and you will actually affect a massive change in a few people's life by being able to back this thing. So check that out. And if you want to check out more of Josh's comic, his auto bio, in the face of auto bio not being a popular guy in a cape, you can go to quarterlystories.com. And you can also go to joshuakemble.com, which is a brand new, shiny website that has all kinds of good stuff on it. And if you haven't gone to joshuakemble.com, like, do yourself a favor and just peruse that for a little bit, because it is awesome. If you want to see my stuff, as always, you can go to corykerr.com. But more importantly right now, go to 100daysofmakingcomics.com/CoryK. That's more important than everything else. And
you can check it out in the show notes too. There's a nice link right down there.
Okay. So, and I actually don't care if you click mine or you click Josh's, but you should click mine. Okay. We will see you guys in a couple of days. Have a good weekend.